you're all welcome. And it's really wonderful to have you all here together with us. This is a time that we need to come together. You know, for Africans and for many of us in different parts of the world, we realize the connectivity that we have in our humanity. And in many times when things have been challenging, that is what has gotten us through the challenges. So it is wonderful to have all of you here. And I just want to remind us all that we are going to have our sessions, all the sessions in French, in English, and in Spanish, so that as many of us as possible can be a part of it. So please use the interpretation button that you have at the bottom there. Look at the icons there at the bottom. Press it and choose the language that you are most comfortable with so that you can participate fully in the sessions. So I guess one of the questions that we need to be asking ourselves is, where are we now? And what is this moment that we find ourselves in? And for me, I think there are a number of things that we need to look at. There are gloomy aspects, but we have had wins. I think that we see a momentum, you know, within global civil society for transformation and the need that change that we need to happen and the clamor for that change. We see that some organizations, a number of them, especially at the international level, are changing strategic course, particularly to shift power, looking at shifting power and resources. The philanthropic community is coming on board. We are seeing a few more donors making the effort to change the way they work as partners and funding systems and structures, some joining the discourse to understand better what the demand is. There seems to be more awareness at the level of global organizations within the global majority that we need to walk in our own power and reduce the level of dependency that we have over the years become comfortable in. There's more energy in looking at this through the political lens and taking and using the power that we have. But there are some setbacks too. The geopolitical changes that stifle civic engagement, muzzle citizenship power, we see is on the rise. We can talk about Trump, the right-wing populist governments that we are seeing coming up in different parts of the world, even in Europe. Our own arguments are being used against us in a negative way. And even as we advocate, for example, for untied aid for civil society, asking that we channel more resources towards locally led development, we see that some countries that claim to be untying aid are rather shrinking their budgets for widespread civic participation and open society and taking away from civil society in their countries and rather giving to state and private sector, not in the direction that we asked for. Some, like Trump, completely closed the valve with the intention to suffocate and kill, literally. And this is something that they are working hard at. There's a use of social media to disinform and misinform and raise public sentiment against social justice causes and the values that we have fought for decades. And this is on the rise. So there's a real agenda to dismantle everything that we have worked for many years. Multilateralism is under serious threat. Many of the global problems that we face that need global political action, like climate injustice, the inequitable economic system, global health challenges, these are going to remain unresolved, and some will retrogress if we do nothing. So we cannot afford to throw our hands up in the air. And in our various spaces, as part of RINGO and other initiatives that many of us are a part of, we have been working to change the system. And this is the time that we need to come together. We need to pool our strengths together to address the challenges that we now face. It's not about global north, global south dichotomies, because what we have here is a real existential threat against human dignity and well-being globally. So this is the time for us to connect more, share resources, create spaces for engagements, and make room, give access to those who do not have access, build our strength and pull from our own resources, look within and strengthen what we have, and connect without to strengthen what we share. Trump and his aid masks cruelty I think, has only hit us the way it has because of the kind of system that we have now. So the collective pain that we feel must ginger us to collectively work together to change the system. And that's what Ringo has been about. And many of you who have been part of Ringo and other initiatives share this passion and the drive to see change. So in the next few days, we will be looking at some of the things that we have all come up with through Ringo to see what is possible, but also identify the gaps where we can to plug in with other initiatives, connecting in a way that makes us work in a more coordinated and strategic manner to truly change the way things are. So thank you so much again for joining us. I'm happy to have here with me Biraj and Asia. I will be introducing them soon. But after our conversation, we will still have some room after the session is, the main session is over, so that if some of us want to continue with some specific conversations, we can do that. So we'll tell you more about that when we get there. So let me now invite Biraj and Asia to join us in a conversation. Biraj Patnaik. Biraj, please forgive me if I did not pronounce your surname correctly. You can correct it when you speak so that we all know the right pronunciation. Biraj is the Executive Director of the National Foundation for India, which is India's oldest independent domestic philanthropy. And prior to joining NFI, he was the South Asia Director of Amnesty International. He's a well-known human rights activist, and he has been part of many national and global campaigns, including the Right to Food campaign in India. And Asia Hernando is the founder of ACAPACA and co-leads the Latin America Permanent Forum for the Decolonization of Cooperation. He serves on the Global Advisory Group of Pledge for Change, is a board member of Latindad, which is one of the largest civil society organization networks in the region, Latin America, and co-chairs the European NGO network in Latin America. He's a regular contributor to El País. Asia is an active voice on the decolonization of international cooperation in Spanish. And I would like to invite Asia and Biraj. First, let's hear from Asia. What would you say is happening around shifting power and decolonization in your region, in Latin America?
Sí,
So Asia, if you can hear from you on this.
gracias, Nana. Gracias, Viras. Y gracias. I'm going to speak in Spanish if it's possible. So, if you need translate, please change the channel. Okay, I'm going to start in Spanish. Bueno, lo primero quiero mostrar mi alegría. Creo que la primera vez puedo hablar en español en un foro común. Yo creo que es muy importante. ¿Eh? Eh, Estoy muy contento de estar aquí con Viras y con Ana, dos personas que he aprendido muchísimo de todos ustedes, que siguen inspirando en todo lo que hacemos sobre la decolonización desde América Latina. Em, yo quiero primero señalar, antes de hablar de América Latina, una cuestión, em, y es que como director de Oxfam para América Latina por muchos años, em, yo creo que fui parte del problema que ahora queremos solucionar. Yo fui parte del problema. Eh, y reconocer que era parte del problema me llevó a una depresión, ¿no? Eh, y salir de esa depresión para luego, con más fuerza, tratar de ser parte de la solución es un proceso complejo. Este es un proceso personal, pero creo que es el proceso que tiene que llevar también el conjunto del sector. Este momento de crisis en el que está ahora el sector, que es equivalente a mi depresión, ¿no? Es tremendamente confuso y es tan confuso como el que tenemos ahora. Pero yo creo, Nana, que en el caso de América Latina, a pesar de escuchar tantos mensajes de crueldad que estamos escuchando por parte de Trump, ahora que parece que nos ensordecen, estamos en un momento tremendamente ilusionante. acabamos de salir de la fundación del Foro Permanente para la Recuperación de la Cooperación, que fue en Lima. Asistieron más de 200 organizaciones y movimientos de toda América Latina. Estuvimos muy contentos de poder contar con Ringo también. La energía que salió de allí fue tremendamente positiva. Y ahora estamos organizando el siguiente foro, que va a ser en Bogotá, donde esperamos a 1.500 personas y donde se va a fijar toda la estrategia del trabajo que conjuntamente vamos a hacer para decolonizar el sector. Entonces, estamos temerosos de Trump, y luego tremendamente ilusionados por el trabajo que estamos emprendiendo.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the work around this that is happening in Latin America and the mobilization that is happening. I think what is encouraging about this is the point that these things that Trump is doing, in spite of the massive effects that it has, we can actually do something to ameliorate and to prevent some of the tragic consequences, and we can actually break out of this mold that we find ourselves. And I like what is happening in Latin America. I know that some have not been as affected as others have been, but we can all work together to have a better system that we have. So thank you so much, Asia. Biraj, the same question. What is happening around shifting power and
Yeah.
decolonization in South Asia in particular?
Nana, thank you for moderating this, and thank you to Ringo for inviting me. I think this is a very important moment as it happens because things are changing by the hour for most of you. I want to first express my solidarity, my support for all friends and colleagues from Palestine and from Ukraine who are on the call. We stand strongly with you against war and aggression and what you're facing, and to all other victims of terrorism across the world, of wars and famine. And this is going to hit all of you the hardest, the recent developments. So, firstly, I want to share my solidarity, my support, not just on my behalf, but also on behalf of all of civil society in India. The second thing I want to remind us of all is that, often in this great environment of doom and gloom, as the world literally unravels before us, we forget to see the positives. And I want to start with the positives. I come from a part of the world which was firmly in the grip of authoritarian regimes, most countries, which is South Asia, for well over anywhere between a decade to 15 years. And if you look at the last 1 year, we've had the youth of Pakistan giving a stinging rebuke to the army by voting in large numbers to a party that wasn't even allowed to contest the elections. We've had a revolution in Sri Lanka with the overthrow of the Rajapaksas and the swearing in of a far left government. We've had a revolution in Bangladesh, which was unthinkable till a few weeks before it happened, where the authoritarian regime of 15 years was thrown out. And in India, a government which came was had all the institutions under their control in the general elections, tried to come back with a huge majority, was cut down to size by the electorate. Of course, we couldn't get rid of the authoritarian regimes everywhere, but I think there is hope. And, we are, in a sense, South Asia. I never thought I would say this on a call, but we are a beacon of hope. Uh, in terms of what is happening on decolonization and the localization agenda in South Asia, I'd like to mention one thing upfront, that the decolonization agenda was carried out by the state. Authoritarian regimes everywhere had already curtailed the ability of donors to receive foreign funding. So, what you are facing with USAID, and my again support and solidarity to every group that's affected, it's a $50 billion hope. We will talk about the positives of it, but in real terms, it's literally health camps being shut down in some of the most but some of the parts of the world where it's most needed, food not going to people affected by famine. I understand that. But in India, if you take, for example, the government has knocked off the ability of over 30,000 groups to receive foreign aid. There is no World Vision in India. There is no Save the Children. There is no Oxfam. There is no, the ability of Action Aid to receive funds, the ability of care, even care. And not just that, they have criminal cases against them. There is no amnesty in India. There is no Greenpeace in India. So the global institutional intervention in India has already been cut down by the Indian state. And this is a model that is likely to be replicated in some form of or the other, where governments themselves have pushed for localization, where they have put very strict norms on employment of foreign nationals. They have put norms on how these budgets are to be made, how are they going to be spent in Nepal, in Bangladesh, in Pakistan, controlled very tightly at the highest level. So the localization agenda in India or in Bangladesh or in Pakistan or even in Nepal looks very different from what it looks in Africa and Latin America, because we have to contend with a state that for with very different motivation than us is already attacking or curtailing or curbing foreign aid. And what's happening really is that we are the challenge I feel that South Asia now needs to respond to is to move from an insular, India centric, hegemonic perspective to a more global perspective. Because India could have been, it was for 50 years when it was a very poor country, a world leader in getting the global south together through the non-aligned movement. Nehru, Tito, and other colleagues, if you remember, formed the non-aligned movement. Castro, Nehru, Tito. There was Latin America. There was Africa. Julius Nyerere. We are moving back to a world that is multipolar and multi-aligned. And we also have in our neighborhood the threat of a new emerging hegemon who will replace the American hegemony, which is China. And therefore, South Asia bears a special responsibility to ensure that whatever remains of the international world order lying in the debris of Khan Yunus in Gaza with dead children is not replaced by human rights with Chinese characteristics, not replaced by infrastructure that pushes back the human rights agenda of the last 50 years. And I think that is the discussion that we need to have on how do we ensure that whilst we pursue the localization agenda, civil society in South Asia can participate in a global movement from civil society in Latin America, in Africa, in Europe, in the Americas, in the UK, to ensure that the new world order, which is multipolar and multi-aligned, places civil society and gives it a central position that it deserves. And how do we create a movement to move to that position from risk aversion to a risk appetite? So I would end here and give the floor to other participants.
Thank you very much. Some of the things that you say resonate with us in Africa, because for us, for a long time, we've had civil society become very dependent on this external donor funding. And we are fighting for locally led development, but we are still very dependent on international donor funding. And what is even more challenging, our governments do not fund us. Our local philanthropy is not channeled towards social justice. We find ourselves in a position where we are pushing to really have community philanthropy, build community philanthropy to support us, but we don't have that culture of community philanthropy supporting social justice. And at the same time, the support that we have does not support civil society's resilience and growth. It continues to make us continuously dependent. And we find ourselves caught within, this situation. And I can tell you for a fact that what's happening, this USAID has affected many organizations here terribly, as well as, because of the dependence that we find ourselves in. And so it is imperative that we find a way out of where we find ourselves. And thank you so much. The points that you made about South Asia, lifting up their heads to look at connections globally, because like we said, we need to make those connections and support each other to get out of the challenges that we find ourselves. So let's become more specifically to your organizations. And Asia, I'll come back to you on Akapaka and how you are working to change the system in Latin America. Can you tell us what some of the wins are, the challenges, the opportunities, and some of the lessons that you have learned? Thank you. Yes, we can hear you.
Les decía que Acapaca surgió hace 3 años, precisamente inspirada por el trabajo de Waxi y por el trabajo que estamos haciendo desde Ringo. Y surgió por una serie de personas, ¿no? Que estábamos atentos a la discusión que se estaba dando, en este caso es de Kenia, en diferentes países de África. Vimos el debate que se estaba dando en Reino Unido también con Bond, vimos el trabajo que Peace Direct estaba haciendo, vimos también los debates que se estaban dando en India. Tradicionalmente ha habido un vínculo muy grande entre India y América Latina, no solo con las teorías de la dependencia y todo esto, sino después ha habido un vínculo fuerte. Entonces vimos todo esto. Y comenzamos a tener conversaciones con nuestros círculos más cercanos. Cuando comenzamos a hablar con algunos de los principales movimientos de América Latina sobre estos debates que se estaban dando en diferentes países de África, en India, en Pakistán, en Indonesia, que se estaban dando en Kenia, que veíamos en otros lugares, nos decían, mira, esto está fantástico, pero llegas 20 años tarde. Esto es así, lo que te venimos diciendo desde hace 20 años, ¿no? Pero solo que tú y los que venís de las ONGs internacionales no escuchabais, ¿no? Pero nunca es tarde y comencemos, ¿no? Entonces, un aprendizaje fundamental fue conectar y tener la capacidad de conectar y que tenga la confianza en ti con los principales movimientos sociales de los lugares donde estás trabajando. Ese capital político en América Latina lo teníamos, las diferentes personas que creamos acá, ¿no? Lo siguiente que hicimos con Acapacá fue ponerlo al servicio de los movimientos. El board de Acapacá son todo movimientos sociales latinoamericanos, ¿no? Entonces, esto hace que tenga legitimidad. Somos una herramienta al servicio de los movimientos sociales latinoamericanos que definen las posiciones y las estrategias, ¿no? Y algunas personas que vienen de los movimientos, con otras que venimos de las ONGs internacionales, trabajamos ahora conjuntamente para decolonizar el sistema, ¿no? Luego vimos las diferentes hipótesis de cambio que tenían como los procesos que se estaban dando a nivel global y vimos que había complementariedades entre las hipótesis de cambio que tenía Pledge for Change, ¿no? Que quiere a través de 13 ONGs muy influyentes cambiar el conjunto del sistema, con las hipótesis de cambio que tenía Ringo, que es introducir innovación y soluciones concretas al sistema, con las hipótesis de cambio que tenía Shift the Power, que es tratar de sembrar, ¿no? Y ver un poquito qué germina del conjunto de las iniciativas que se estaban dando a nivel global. La tradición latinoamericana es otra complementaria. La tradición latinoamericana es tratar de construir en base a los procesos articulados que se estaban dando. Ya hay una organización muy fuerte y coaliciones muy fuertes de movimientos indígenas, de movimientos campesinos, de movimientos de mujeres y de la academia progresista que en sus diferentes espacios ya llevaban construyendo todo esto, ¿no? Entonces, articulamos todos estos, ¿no? Articulamos los principales movimientos de América Latina con diferentes conversaciones, ¿no? Articulamos a la Academia Latinoamericana, que lleva 50 años hablando de la importancia de la descolonización. Les quisimos parte de este proceso y construimos ese proceso conjuntamente con ellos. Fue tan simple y tan complejo como eso, ¿no? Entonces veíamos que era importante procesos de formación como establecer un lenguaje común de qué es esto de la decolonización, ¿no? Organizamos diferentes cursos sobre decolonización y cooperación y fue un desborde. En el primero se apuntaron 200 personas, en el siguiente otros no sé cuántas y fue un desborde, ¿no? Entonces, organizamos los cursos, sacamos un primer documento declarativo firmado por estos movimientos para establecer como un marco narrativo que creemos que era importante y organizamos el primer foro permanente para la decolonización de la cooperación conjuntamente con un grupo de 18 organizaciones, ¿no? Con un presupuesto de $10.000. Era el presupuesto que teníamos puesto por Latindad, una organización social latinoamericana. No vino de la cooperación, ¿no? Entonces, y eso se creó como una ola que creó toda una expectativa ahora de lo que podemos avanzar conjuntamente muy positivo. Y por eso decía que estamos en un momento ahora, pues con mucha responsabilidad, pero con mucha ilusión por partes iguales, Nana.
Thank you. I like the idea about movements and connecting the different movements, because a lot of the time when we talk about this, we seem to be talking about organizations, and we really have to make this a movement building process. And so that is really encouraging. I just wanted you to mention one challenge that you see and another one opportunity that from what the work that you are doing with Akapaka. Just one challenge and one opportunity before I move on to Biraj to tell us what's happening in South Asia.
Vale. Bueno, el principal desafío que tenemos es el dilema entre la crueldad y la solidaridad, ¿no? Ahora vamos a tener los siguientes años un mundo mucho más cruel, ¿no? Em, em, es la misma crueldad que han sufrido por décadas los movimientos indígenas, pero ahora va a ser más grande, lo va a sufrir más gente, creo, ¿no? Eso es un desafío que tenemos y tenemos que adaptar las estrategias a eso, no cabe duda, ¿no? Que eso es importante y creo que tenemos que establecer mayor empatía entre quienes en estos momentos van a estar sufriendo con más agudeza esta crueldad, estén en el norte, en el sur, en un lado o en otro. El establecimiento de esa empatía ahora va a ser fundamental, ¿no? Em, yo veo una oportunidad yo veo una oportunidad definitivamente para poder avanzar con nuestra agenda. Creo que es la oportunidad, de hecho, ahora, ¿no? Creo que tenemos que esperar igual un par de meses para ver las cosas con más claridad, ¿no? Pero esto va a abrir, ver que, o sea, la alternativa a lo que estamos proponiendo es esa crueldad, nos va a hacer que tengamos debates mucho más desafiantes intelectualmente y que encontremos, nos va a meter presión para que encontremos soluciones más creativas al mundo que queremos construir, al nuevo orden que se está construyendo, como decía Virás, ¿no? Creo que vamos a tener más espacio para poder ser parte de esas reflexiones. Estamos más cerca de lo nuevo, ¿no? Y es cuando más lejos se ve, pero estamos más cerca de lo nuevo. Creo que esa es una oportunidad, pero para aprovechar esa oportunidad
Yeah.
creo que hay dos cosas que tenemos
So,
que hacer, Nana. Lo primero, tenemos que estar mucho más articulados porque nos va la vida en ello.
thank you.
Ahora nos va a ir la vida en ello. Entonces hay que estar más articulados y hay que complementar mucho mejor las estrategias de lo que lo hemos hecho en el pasado, que hemos actuado un poco por libre en ocasiones, ¿no? Pero hay gente que desde el norte global va a tener que defender la cooperación y defender la solidaridad. Lo va a tener que defender, ¿no? Mientras otros van a tener que encontrar soluciones sobre la decolonización de la cooperación y tienen que complementar esfuerzos, ¿no? Hay otros que van a tener que trabajar con estrategias de persuasión. Hay muchos todavía que tenemos que persuadir para ser parte para sumarse a este movimiento, ¿no? Pero hay otros que van a tener que trabajar con mecanismos de presión que también hace falta, ¿no? Hay prácticas en la cooperación que no se pueden permitir más, ¿no? Y hace falta tener mecanismos de presión un poco mejores de los que tenemos ahora, ¿no? Entonces, pero nos tenemos que articular porque el contexto que vamos a tener definitivamente va a ser complejo, Nana.
Thank you so much. Biraj, can you share with us how the National Foundation for India is working to change the system in South
Yeah.
Asia
So
and some of the
let me
ways,
take
the challenges, and
absolutely.
opportunities here?
Thank you, Nana. Let me take the last bit of what you asked us here first to talk about the challenge. The primary challenge in South Asia is that it's very different from other parts of the world, in the sense, even in Asia, in the sense that we don't have a regional grouping, right? We don't have an equivalent of an ASEAN. We have a SAARC, but that is held hostage by the hostilities between India and Pakistan, and it's not an effective body. It's a dead body. It's always been on a ventilator in the ICU. As a result of that, the level of civil society and people to people cooperation is extremely low as compared to other parts of the world. It's impossible for an Indian to get a visa to Pakistan and vice versa. And it's close to impossible for a Bangladeshi or an Indian to get visas to each other countries. It's very difficult for a Pakistani to go to Bangladesh and vice versa. So even in terms of travel between these 7 countries, there are great impediments. So that's the first thing I want to say. Second, we are lucky in only one sense, that India's hegemony in the region which was replicated amongst civil society as well, where Indian civil society dominated the discourse just because of its size, its access to resources, and so on, has not translated into action at the level of the shift the power movement in the region. And I'm very glad to report that the lead on shifting the power and localizing the agenda is not led from India, is not led by me or from the National Foundation, but it's led by my colleagues in Nepal, by friends in Sri Lanka, by people in Bangladesh, who have a far more vibrant, and of course, they have a locational advantage because Nepal and Colombo are virtually the only 2 places in South Asia where all South Asians can converge. They have taken it forward. And we're very proud of that, that we as NFI play a supporting cast to civil society in South Asia. We sponsor awards for South Asians. We try and convene, but now no longer in India, but outside of India. We are part of Shift the Power movement with colleagues in Nepal and Sri Lanka, uh, but acutely conscious that in the order that we are seeking to create, the localization agenda must be led by the smaller countries and civil society in the smaller countries in the region, and not replicate the hegemony of India, of the geopolitical space within civil society. So that's the first point I wanted to make. The second, our primary job as the National Foundation for India has been to shift the needle on the social justice agenda with local philanthropies. We work with some of the largest philanthropies in India. We raise money from them uh, to support social justice causes, one, for smaller groups. But we also work with them in changing their perspective on social justice in India and what needs to be done, while factoring in the risks that come with the authoritarian government. Uh, as Indian civil society, we are not allowed by law to work in other parts outside of India. We cannot transfer any money or resources, for instance, by law, and so on and so forth. Uh, and therefore, our ability really in South Asia to localize depends on how closely we can work with civil society in other countries, particularly Nepal, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka, to push the agenda forward.
Yeah, thank you very much for this. As you were speaking, I was thinking of the situation in Africa and the fact that for many of us, this discussion about shifting power is something that several local organizations, even though they feel the bite, have not necessarily fully partaken in the discussion, the international global discussion on shifting power. And we need many more of us to be a part of this. We do have our different coalitions and different groups that we engage in, but there needs to be more of a mobilization and a building of solidarity on this agenda, in a way that is more coordinated and deliberate, I think. And so that's one of the things that we are doing. I mean, we've talked about several opportunities here. There's more of an awareness, the fact that there's a need to change. There's movement building that is happening, but we need to do a lot more of it. We still need, when it comes to challenges, we still need more local organizations leading in this process. And there's something you mentioned, Biraj, about philanthropies and changing, because yes, we do have the bilaterals who have their own, the supports that they give and the resourcing that they give to civil society, which in many ways are tied by, all these political ideologies and all the different things that they use to restrict funding to support civil society and to shrink the civic space. But we also have private philanthropies. And that is one of the areas that I think we also need to see how philanthropy really doesn't go this way of shrinking civic space and taking away resources that could support, but also that the kind of support that is given is support that actually facilitates the agency of organizations and builds their resilience and strength to enable them to achieve the missions for which they have been set up. And I think that is also one of those things that we need to talk about. Both of you talked about building solidarity, learning from each other, sharing resources, finding the spaces for us to engage in. And for Ringo, that is it. That really is the agenda for change that we are looking at. At Ringo, we are consolidating the learnings from the phase 1 of the project, where the Ringo Social Lab undertook this extensive inquiry process. Many of you were part of it, and develop prototypes to challenge some of the major structural barriers to change in the sector and demonstrate new ways of working. In phase 2, we focused the efforts on influencing change across civil society, and we were working particularly looking at funders, working with boards of INGOs, and the culmination of what we've learned in these past 4 years is what is feeding and shaping what we are calling an agenda for change. And this will serve more as a strategic framework which will transform not only INGOs. I know that we say it's Ringo reimagining the INGO, but I think we are looking at the broader development aid landscape, reflecting our commitment to reshaping global civil society through the implementation of specific and impactful reform. So this agenda is crucial because it directly addresses systemic imbalances within development aid, and the agenda for aid for change positions us to confront the current challenges that we are facing head on and build a more equitable and effective global development system. So I want to share with you this agenda for change, which we have, pulled out from the last 4 years of the work that we've done together with many of you, and which we are hoping will be amplified for buy-in from all of you here and as well as other stakeholders in the development space. And the principles, many of you align with it, and you see it also in some of the manifestos like the Shift the Power Manifesto and other initiatives that we are a part of. That one of them is that the so-called international development system that we currently have and operate is colonial, it's inequitable, it's structurally racist, and it's flawed and must be transformed. And we are therefore rebalancing power. We think it is essential to create a more equitable and effective system. So decision-making power must shift to enable agency and adequate resources for the historically marginalized global majority. That is the whole idea. These are the principles. Resourcing development, we say, must value contributions beyond money and recognize the input of all partners. Local organizations have varying capacities, and their resources and resourcefulness should be prioritized and valued in partnerships. And values such as trust and respect are integral to transforming the ethos of partnership from patronizing to participatory partnerships. And we are also saying that leadership must align with the values and principles of shifting power. So this is leadership at all levels of the system must align with these values. And that none of us can change this unfair system alone. And so this working in silos, focusing on our logos and trying to bloat our egos must stop. We must work across silos and in solidarity. So what are the areas of action? Looking and pulling from the lessons so far, we need to address unfair and disproportionate assumptions about the risk of funding locally. And one of the prototypes that has been working on this is the RINGO risk prototype, which is one way to reshape and renegotiate risk. And currently the host of that is the International Civil Society Center, ICSC, and they have worked together with other groups on this through some conversations that we've called brave conversations to really reimagine risk and the way we have to engage it. Our primary accountability should be to the communities that we serve, not to the donors. And the PALM model, which is an accountability and learning model led by the Pledge for Change, demonstrates this. It is a more participative approach to accountability. And I'm sure as time goes on, many of us will learn more about this model, which is also something that RINGO fully supports. Communities should not just be involved in programming and funding decisions. They should lead these wherever possible. The RINGO reverse call for proposals is one of these models, which puts the communities in the driver's seats, and the Zambia Governance Foundation has been working on this, leading this process together with others. The RINGO toolkit on participatory grants management also helps further this idea. We are saying that donors should prioritize funding locally, keeping ambitions highlighted by the 2,000 to be funded reports. I'm sure many of you have heard about that. And this is connected to the anti-aid prototype as well. This is something that the Global Fund for Community Foundations led. And there's the commitments that are laid out in the donor statement on locally led development. We have also talked about, if you look at the work that we are doing, the dominance of English in international development, along with the language that perpetuates in power imbalances, must be addressed. And you see from our session today that we want to make sure that we are speaking in as many languages as possible. In the main language, some of the main language, we are hoping that we can do many more, and also in our countries, really work in our local languages to break down some of these concepts and make it something that we own as a people. So the RINGO language prototype is one attempt to use technology to do this, and the Uganda National NGO platform is the one that has been hosting this language prototype. And one of the key areas for us is that we also have to make sure that there's a mindset shift at the level of local organizations and communities. We must begin to use, our own power and agency to address some of the challenges. Local organizations and communities must shift their mindset, and we must recognize and harness our power and agency to develop our resources and build sustainable infrastructure. And investments into the work that we do should focus on reducing dependency and fostering resilience and sustainability. So we need to do some work around that. And to achieve lasting development, we need more voices from diverse regions to join these conversations. And that's why we are so happy that Akapaka is leading the work in Latin America. We know that the National Fund for India is leading some of the work in Southern Asia. There's work that Peace Direct and WAXI and others are doing in Francophone Africa. There are other areas, and I think that we all need to connect the work that we are doing around this agenda, because it is essential that we deepen these regional and cross-regional engagements for truly inclusive and context-driven solutions. So this phase 3 of RINGO is really looking at scaling up successful prototypes, sharing toolkits and learnings, and deepening regional engagements. connecting with the wider system initiative so that we strengthen our solidarity. And we've also launched a brand new Ringo website. I'm sure that you see the link in the chat soon. Please check it out for information and other useful resources that you can use. And let's find ways to really connect together. Thank you so much, Biraj and Asia, for sharing your experiences with us. I know that many of us will connect in many ways to what you've shared with us, and also find ways of actually truly connecting and so that we can really strengthen our engagements together. I'd like to pass the mic on now to Rebecca, who would lead us in the next session. Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you so much, Nana. So now it's over to you, all of you. You've been hearing from Biraj, you've been hearing from Asya, you've been hearing from Nana, you've been hearing from Ringo about some of the opportunities there are for change in civil society. What do you see as opportunities for change? It could be big, it could be small, it could be very local, it could be global. But please write, spend a couple of minutes now writing into the chat. What do you see as opportunities for change where you are? And if it's very place specific, please put the place so that we understand the context. And this is to inspire all of us to be aware of the seeds, the shoots, the saplings, the trees that are beginning to grow that represent opportunities for change in different parts of the world. Tell us what you're aware of. Add a link if you've written about it, if you've got a blog somewhere, share the link to the blog so that we can all read about it. And we'll collect all of this over the course of the next couple of days and share it back with you. So spend a couple of minutes now writing into the chat, what opportunities do you see for change in civil society? Okay,
it's starting to start coming up now.
Starting to roll in. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, everybody. This incredible stream of ideas is just flying into the chat. And I'm not going to try and read anything out just now. We're going to hold on to this. We're going to share it with you as sources of inspiration today, tomorrow, and as we go forward. So if you're still writing, keep going, but I'm going to hand back to you, Nana, to close us.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this. So many interesting ideas coming up in the chat. I think that we have a few more sessions today and tomorrow where we can continue to engage. There are 2 more sessions coming up. One, so that we can dive deeper into leadership and governance, prioritizing equity and accountability. That's the session immediately after this one, which will start at 2:30 GMT. And then the next one, which will start at 3 p.m. GMT, I think, is resource flows, addressing the beating heart of the system. So we are diving deeper into some of these. So this session was a much broader one to look at, give us a broader view of what is happening.